A couple of weeks ago, the FCC ruled that AM stations can go to full digital if they choose. Well, what does this mean? How does it affect you as a listener? And is it too little too late? HD radio. Well, depending on who you're talking to, it could mean a whole bunch of different things. It could evoke different emotions. If you're talking to a salesperson, well, they may go, awesome, excellent, more opportunity for revenue. If you're talking to a consumer, confusion, apathy. If you're talking to a broadcast engineer, well, let's just say some unsafe for work words usually are a part of the discussion. So anyways, when it comes to AM HD radio, there's a lot of different opinions, and not all of them good, not all of them bad. It is a balance that needs to be struck by the station owner and by the management. So let's start with the basics of what is HD radio. Well, I can tell you for sure right now, HD radio does not mean CD quality audio. It does not mean perfect quality audio. HD, contrary to like HD video, does not mean better quality per se. HD means hybrid digital, and that was one of the proposals that was put forth around 2000 to the FCC about how to do digital radio. And it was this hybrid model that this company had proposed. So imagine looking at the spectrum. On one side, on the left side, you have your lower frequencies. On the right side, you have your higher frequencies. In the middle is this analog signal that looks kind of like a pyramid. And the FCC has defined what's called a mask, and that is a line that limits this radio signal that stations are not allowed to go past because they're trying to protect from interference to other stations that are adjacent to this station. Inside that mask is room for two digital carriers, or two digital signals on each side. They've been called Bart Simpsons, they've been called flat top, whatever, but what they show up as are blocks basically on the spectrum because it's all digital information. Those digital carriers are what was proposed around 2000 to be right next to that analog signal, which is that pyramid. So that all fits inside the FM or the AM mask, and that was the proposal. And it's essentially about the same for AM and FM. And all this is for United States radio stations. Europe has a whole different standard that's called Digital Radio Mondiale, I believe it is. And it's a different scheme. So, what does this FCC ruling have to do with that? And how does that, what does it mean? What does that FCC ruling actually mean? Well, up until this point, stations were not allowed to go full digital. They had to have some sort of analog digital hybrid, hence the hybrid digital part of the HD. So they would have to share the analog and the digital. Now, that company that originally had the specifications also had a provision for full HD, and it basically was adding more digital carriers in towards the center of the channel. And there are white papers and roadmaps that detail all of this that you can probably find online. I think the company is now called Xperi, with an X and an I at the end, and used to be called Ubiquiti. Anyways, it's out there. You can find some of that information and some of the roadmaps for it. But this decision now allows AM stations to be able to go full-time digital. So that's new, that's incredible, that's never really been done here in the United States before, at least not for broadcast radio. So the decision to allow AM stations to go full digital has numerous factors involved, one of which is a rising noise floor. LED lights, fluorescent fixtures, more and more devices out there is raising the noise, the RF noise floor, and it's making it harder for AM stations to be clean and be clear, and for people who are driving around or fixed in a fixed location at home to be able to hear an AM station as good as you used to be able to. Now, all that means is that AM has basically been relegated to the format of talk, and there really aren't very many music format stations out there for AM. Most of the AM stations are now all talk stations. So there's that loss of a format for AM. And now with this all digital aspect, there is this potential capability of bringing music formats back to the AM band. Bringing back music formats comes with the larger bandwidth that's available for digital. So again, going back to our spectrum plot here, we're looking at the spectrum for an AM station. And if you look, that there's that big pointy part in the middle. That is the analog signal. And if you have that analog signal, well, you can't put digital signals right there. So being able to remove that and put digital signals there now gives you more data throughput, more bandwidth for data. Before, an AM HD sounded like a bad MP3, but if you are able to add bits to it, now you're starting to get into FM quality and being able to get full audio fidelity. And, if you're listening to a full HD AM station, it might sound really good. It might sound as good, maybe even a little bit better than most FM stations. So how is this going to impact you? You as the listener driving around in your car, if you're here in Los Angeles, spending so many hours in your car trying to get somewhere, especially during rush hour traffic. Well, if you don't have an HD radio right now in your car, when that AM station that you're used to listening to decides to go full HD, full digital, guess what? You won't be able to hear them anymore. When you tune to that station, all you'll hear is because you're hearing the digital noise instead of hearing the actual audio. One of the things that it might actually impact is emergency communications. Here in LA, there's about two big AM stations that one's a news talk, and the other is a news format station. And between the two of those, if there's a big earthquake or a big disaster or some sort of emergency, that's where people go to hear what's going on, to hear the emergency information, and to understand how do we recover, or what do we do, what's the action supposed to be taken. Anyways, if one or both of them decided to go full HD, all those little crank-up radios that you all have in your emergency kits, right? All of those radios are pointless. They're useless. They won't give you any information anymore because they're analog. You will need to get a new digital version. So while the listener experience will be so much better on one hand, those listeners who don't have the ability to get into that listener experience are going to be left out. And they may decide, well, you know what? Maybe I won't listen over the air. I'm just going to go onto the station's web stream. Okay, still a win for the station. They still have a listener. But more than likely, what's going to happen is those listeners are just going to go somewhere else. They're going to go to another station that they can hear and that they can listen to without having to buy new equipment. So in the intro, I mentioned that broadcast engineers generally are not too enthusiastic about HD radio. Well, there's a bunch of technical reasons for that. One of those technical reasons is the added audio delay that comes from HD radio. There is about an 8-second delay from the time that the audio comes out of the studio and it gets transmitted over the air. So in that 8 seconds, if you are doing a hybrid solution, which is analog and digital, you have to align those audio signals perfectly. I mean, down to the audio sample in phase. I mean, we're talking thousands, small sections of time in order for you as a listener to not have any issues when you're listening. So in a hybrid digital solution, what happens is your radio tunes to the analog section first, the analog portion first, hears that and goes, oh, look, there's digital here. And then when it has enough built up of a buffer for the digital, then it blends into that digital. Now, if you are not aligned, if your analog is real time and your digital is delayed, well, when they blend from analog to digital, they're going to go back in time 8 seconds. And then when they come back out, they're going to jump ahead 8 seconds. So having those two aligned is very, very important. And having them aligned perfectly is even more important, so that way listeners don't get frustrated as they're driving through, say, canyons or areas where the signal is not as perfect. And so having that alignment reduces phase cancellations and time jumps, and anyways, it eliminates problems for your listener, and it makes them have a better experience, a seamless experience. Now, on the AM side, the antenna systems are, some of them are older, but you have to realize that for an AM station, the whole tower is the antenna. With an FM station, the tower is just the support structure. There's a little, so let's say my arm is the tower, this is the antenna. The antenna is just mounted onto that support structure. So the whole tower is built as the antenna, as the radiator. So that AM station has a certain amount of bandwidth, and I'm talking RF bandwidth, not data bandwidth, RF bandwidth, that it can transmit without having reflected power and causing issues back at the transmitter. So older stations who were built right on that edge of having enough bandwidth for an analog signal may not have enough RF bandwidth for that extended digital amount of signal. Then the last part is the data transport from the studio to the transmitter site. And you have to have a good data transport to get that HD radio information from the studio to the transmitter site. At the studio, there's what's called an importer, and that basically is like an encoder, and it encodes it into this HD radio data format and then sends it to the exporter at the transmitter site, and that exporter converts it to RF basically, and then that goes into the exciter and into the amplifier and out to the antenna. So you have all these extra pieces that you have to worry about: the data transport and the physical amount of space. Some transmitter sites, space is luxury. I mean, to have to add another 3-4 RU amount of equipment in there, it's just not possible. There is not the space for it. So that's another headache for engineers as we have to put in, install, maintain HD radio. Lastly, for a broadcast engineer, they also have to manage expectations. Staff's expectations of what HD radio is, and listener expectations of what HD radio is. I mean, you hear HD and you're thinking video. You're thinking, like this video right now, you might be watching it in 4K. That's Ultra HD. Or you're watching it in Full HD, which is 1080. Or you're watching it in HD, which is 720. Or maybe you're part of the 360p club. So HD does not mean better sound. It does not mean digital quality or, like CD quality. No, it means something completely different. So having to manage those expectations is also something that's important. So speaking of managing expectations, I'm going to manage my expectations with this video. Thanks for making it this far through it. And I appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed this little tech talk, give me a thumbs up. I appreciate it. And subscribe if you're not. Leave a comment down below if there's something that you would like me to talk about as far as broadcast goes. If I don't have the answer, I will go get the answer, or I'll interview somebody who has the answer, because there's a lot of really smart people in Los Angeles that are way, way smarter than I am. Finally, if you are one of those die-hard analog radio fans, I'm not going to leave you out on this. Give me a thumbs down. I want to see how many of you there are. All right, anyways, thank you again. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you hanging out here to the end. Watch some of the other videos. There's plenty of other content here. And again, leave a comment if there's something specific that you would like. And until the next video, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.